Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to our new hackathon on air. Today we're going to speak about the SEO speed update. You probably heard about it. It's quite a big update that's coming in July 2018. So we thought it would be good to bring someone on the hackathon on air that's working in the SEO field at Google. So that's Vincent, who's joining us today. In case you want to follow us on Twitter, we're all quite active there. So if you have any questions following this live stream, or any questions related to it, just shoot us a message, follow us, and we're more than happy to support you as much as we can. So, as most of you know, I'm Dominic. I work in mobile UX at Google in London, and with us today is Dennis and Vincent. So I'll give it over to Dublin so they have a chance to introduce themselves.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks for tuning in again. Hello from snowy Dublin. I brought Vincent with me. He's our SEO expert for today, so he will be able to answer hopefully all the questions you have around mobile speed and the mobile speed update. So Vincent, maybe you want to introduce yourself really quickly?
Yeah. So I'm Vincent Corson. I've been working at Google for almost 6 years. I work in a team called the Search Quality Team, and my job is basically to speak and listen to the ecosystems of people that are interested in the organic search engine that Google provides, to improve our products and to make sure that the messages that our engineering teams want to make clear to the public are actually communicated. I usually focus on the French market. I'm originally French, but basically I was invited by Dom and Dennis here to talk to all of you today about the speed update. So I'm delighted to do this.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the stream. Cool. I'd say without further ado, we just jump into the content and see what there is we can talk about. So I guess most of you have heard already about our speed update. I think we announced it like almost 2 months ago now. I think it was announced in January. So starting in July 2018, page speed will be a ranking factor for mobile searches. That's like the bottom line, I guess. But there is a little bit more to it. And if you want to read more about it, you just can follow this handy short link, and there you will have the whole blog post. But that's why we also brought Vincent to give you a little bit more of context here. So Vincent, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the speed update.
Yeah, definitely. So whenever there is an update to Google's algorithms in the search engine, the first question is, what's changing? Am I impacted? What's happening? Is it a big one? It's actually much more than one question. So there are quite a few questions. So I'm going to try to highlight just a few points here to give the scope and impact of this update, and then we'll take questions later on during the event. So the first thing of note is that this is a change that is in continuity with the direction that we have been going to for the past decade, basically. Page speed, how fast a URL, the contents of a URL actually load on a user's device, has already been a ranking factor for desktop searches for about 7 to 8 years. So it's nothing new in the desktop world. What is happening is that soon, in July 2018, it's going to be also the case for mobile queries, whatever the mobile device. So this was announced in the first half of January, and it's planned for July 2018. The reason that we give that much of a heads up is that we have heard from the community of SEOs, SEO professionals, website owners, small and big companies, etc., is that for some of the updates, they would have like more of a heads up. So we've done this now for a few of our updates, and this one doesn't change. We try to give a heads up. Then the next question is, what sort of impact does it have? So here, we basically don't expect a majority of the queries entered by users to be impacted by this update. It should be a small percentage of the queries. We are not really in a position to communicate specifics of which queries, etc., but know that it should not be a change, an update that will have a major impact on all of your queries. It's quite targeted. In terms of what pages, what content will actually be impacted by this change, this is an update that is more about making sure that the very slow pages don't necessarily show up as much as currently, rather than making sure the very fast pages show up. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't really optimize for speed. What I'm saying is that the only pages that should be impacted are the ones that really, really have a very long loading time and have a very poor experience for users. So we're going to go over some of what that means in terms of metrics to follow, etc., in the next few slides. So this is the general scope of this update. And now I'll hand over to Dom for a bit more information on the tools that exist.
Yeah, well, Dom, so what can we do to actually not get surprised by the speed update in terms of how can we maybe measure speed? How can we optimize for that? Could you give us a few ideas here and there, maybe?
Yeah, sure. I think first of all, what Vincent already said is it's really important that we have given everyone a heads up, so it really shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. However, we do know that some people like to leave things to the last minute, and then obviously it can become quite tricky to be ready for it. So I think the most important thing is to really understand where are you at with your site. So there are a whole bunch of performance tools out there, and they all do have different ways of measuring page speed. So we just picked 4 here that are not all Google owned. For example, Web Page Test is a kind of like a third-party tool, however, that we do frequently use. And it's really important to use a variety of tools to get a better understanding of the current performance of your site. So there's Lighthouse, which we've been talking about quite a lot recently. It's a really nice optimization tool that sits within Chrome DevTools, and it allows you to run certain audits on your sites to get results about how do I perform in terms of speed, how do I perform in terms of accessibility, how do I perform in terms of SEO, which is a new audit that was included into Lighthouse. This is a really great tool, and it's not just for developers because it is sitting in DevTools, and if you are familiar with DevTools, definitely make use of it. However, it also exists as a Chrome extension. So basically, whatever URL you're on, you can just hit a little icon and it will auto-generate a report giving you a lot of information from which basically you can create a little roadmap and decide what you actually want to focus on. Another great performance tool is Chrome DevTools itself. There are different tabs, and you can really dig deep into performance to see what is going on in a browser's main thread, what is blocking the rendering, the parsing, and how can you action up on that to make sure that you improve the critical rendering path, because what really matters is that you bring content to the screen as quickly as possible. Then there's PageSpeed Insights, which probably most of you know. It's quite an old tool. However, we recently launched a version 2 of it, which now includes data from the Chrome User Experience Report, which is really nice because for the first time we're not testing speed based on some testing environment that we came up with, but we're actually taking the real user data that accesses your site and show you how long did it take for the user to load the most critical content. So we believe that that's a really, really great tool. So definitely check it out and see what is the score for the first contentful paint, what is the score for the onload event, and then you will also get in like a little graph that will show you where are you at in terms of like your competition. Like we're showing you, are you in the fast section of your vertical or in the medium section or the slow section, and that will also give you an idea whether you should focus on performance optimization or not. Last but not least, Web Page Test, which is a tool that powers currently Test My Site, the Google tool. And Web Page Test really is a very sophisticated tool that allows you to test your site under various circumstances. So you can set up different testing environments, and then you can see how you perform. You will get back a waterfall, so you know exactly which resource is being loaded where and how does it impact the speed of your website. So really, that's the first thing you should do is like familiarize yourself with the performance tools and get an idea where are you currently at, and then you can make the decision whether you should make an effort to improve speed to be ready for July 2018, or if you're already getting good results, then maybe you want to focus on something else like user experience improvement. So there's obviously a lot of stuff you can do, that will give you a good idea what you should focus on and prioritize. If we jump to the next slide, for those of you that want to learn a bit more on the performance tools, we have done, we have covered all of this content in previous Hackathon on Airs. So I put those 2 short links on the slide. There's one Hackathon on Air that covers pretty much all performance tools. And then there's one Hackathon on Air that really digs deep onto Chrome developer tools and shows you what's possible with this performance tool. So I really, really suggest that you check it out. Have a look. If there are certain tools that you're familiar with, just jump that part of the content and see if there's anything you can extract from it. We also have a ton of other videos on optimization where you can get really valuable information that will help you to get ready for July 2018. So we'll just leave the slide on maybe for a couple more seconds so everyone can take the short links. And then we'll move on to...
I can interrupt you, Dom, very quickly. One of the advantages of these formats, the YouTube Hackathon on Air, is that when you watch them, you can ask questions and people try to answer them live. And it's the same for this specific YouTube Live we're in currently. There's already 2 questions that came in the chat, but don't hesitate to add yours so that we'll try to answer them as we go.
Perfect. Yeah, let's jump to the next slide here. I hope everybody got the chance to have a look at the short links. Otherwise, you also will find our event page in the description shortly. So you can also just head there. There you'll find the whole repository of all the videos we've done so far. Might be worth having a look and see if there's something you might be interested in. I think another really, really cool feature we just announced a few days ago is our new speed scorecard. Actually sitting in our Think with Google mobile hub now. I think it's really nice because it lets you basically compare your site to other sites. Maybe it could be competitors, could also be sub-sites of your own sites, of course. And it also uses the Crux, the Chrome User Experience Report. So as Dom said before, you actually get a feeling of how does my site out in the wild. You don't have to rely on synthetic laboratory data. This is real, actual user data. So I think that's kind of cool. You can also choose here. I think as of now we have 12 geos added, and there will be more, but all the major markets should be covered already. You can choose your connection speed. So maybe check out if there's a difference between 3G or 4G. Are you particularly good or maybe not so good in one of the speeds itself? You can compare up to 10 different URLs, which is kind of cool. So if you're in a highly competitive market, this might be very handy as well to see how am I stacking up against my competition, especially if it's a very competitive market. Usually it can be really handy to be just faster. Just having a faster site can make a huge difference in these markets. Well, just a side note, the speed scorecard shows the 90th percentile of first contentful paint. So this is how the speed is actually measured. And the ranking is a combination of first contentful paint, DOM content loaded and unload. Again, if you might want to learn more about these metrics, just have a look at the videos we posted before, especially in the web performance tools, Hackathon on Air. We're explaining a bit more which content, which metric to look at to fix certain problems or get certain information. And I think another cool thing that is, it's on the same side. We also released it with our speed scorecard is our new impact calculator. Potentially a bit more interesting for the marketeers and SEO specialists out there maybe. So this is more of how does speed impact the business side of things? So you add a few metrics there, and then you can basically see if I'll be 1 or 2 seconds faster, what would that do with my potential revenue? So what would be the incremental revenue by, let's say, increasing my site's loading time by 2 seconds? So this is kind of cool, especially if you need maybe buy-in to get more development resources, and you need to convince someone. This could be a good way to actually start this conversation saying, look, performance might not be the shiniest of all things, but there is an actual return on invest. So it is really worth investing in performance because it will increase our revenue. And this might give you the option to actually work on your site. Cool. So I would like to give it back to Dom. Dom, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the top speed offenders, we usually call them. What to look out for from a technical point of view if I want to improve my site.
Yeah, sure. Definitely. That's actually a great picture, and I believe, Dennis, you took that, really? Like, right?
Yeah, it was from Hong Kong in holiday. Yeah, I really like that one. Very spontaneous shot.
That's amazing. Yeah. So, what's slowing down your site? You know, it's kind of like, I think we already talked about it so many times. Yet it's, you know, kind of like the top speed offenders, they don't change. So that's why we want to talk about a few things that are typically the reasons why your site is slow. And that is prioritizing content, CSS, JavaScript, and images. So starting off, it is incredibly important to prioritize your content correctly. Purely because if you are loading a lot of stuff that's actually not, let's say, visible on a mobile device, it is still being downloaded. It is still being prioritized by the browser, and then maybe it's you know, the browser will hide it. Hence, like, you're kind of like waiting for resources to be loaded, and then the resources are not actually shown on the screen, and the resources that are actually important, you have to wait even longer for. So it's really, really important to focus on what is the most critical content and making sure that this critical content is loaded first. There are some ways to give a browser a hint that a certain resource is important or maybe not that important. So definitely check out preload and prefetch. Preload is a value for the rel attribute that basically allows it to give the browser a hint and say, hey, this resource is really important. Please try to load it as quickly as possible. Whereas prefetch is doing the opposite. It's usually used for resources that might be used, you know, in future navigation. So you're telling the browser, you know, I still want to load this resource, but can you please, you know, load it at the lowest priority possible because I don't really need it right now. We also have a hackathon on air on that specific topic, so definitely check it out as well if you want to learn more about preload, prefetch, pre-render, etc. And definitely make sure that you prioritize your content correctly, because it can make a huge difference if you do. The second thing to focus on would be CSS. Most of you probably know that CSS blocks the rendering of the page, because obviously the CSS can, you know, like layouts the page, so the browser has to wait until it's fully loaded and understood. So definitely make sure that you have a strategy behind the CSS. Ideally, you want to load the critical CSS first, and if you can load it inline, that's even better, because you're not you don't need to make the server request to get your CSS file. If you can't load it inline, fine, but definitely try to load the critical CSS first. Any additional CSS, it can, you know, you can still load it and you can still cache it just to make, you know, kind of like to make sure that you don't sort of delay the slow user experience to the second or third page. But additional CSS should be loaded asynchronously or via prefetch. So this is super critical. And the next thing you should focus on is JavaScript. The problem is somewhat similar. JavaScript is parser blocking. So when the browser downloads a document and parses through the document and hits a JavaScript file, it stops parsing to download the JavaScript and execute it. And obviously during that time, you have a delay. It's usually the blank screen and nothing is being rendered. So that's why we say, if possible, avoid large JavaScript libraries or files, purely because of the effect that it's parser blocking. Make sure that you use JavaScript only if it's really necessary. So like no over-engineering if you don't really need it. And if you need to load JavaScript libraries, try to load them async or defer. That will guarantee that you're downloading the libraries and you can execute them. However, you do all that without blocking the parser. So definitely look into that in case you're not familiar with it. but it's crucial to paint the content as quickly to the screen as possible. And last but not least, and that's probably one of the most well-known speed offenders, it's images. Obviously, images are super important, and there are certain verticals where it's more important than others. On average, images account for about 63% of a page's weight, and that's quite a lot. And there are certain verticals where that even goes up into the 80s. So it's really, really important to optimize images, because especially if you're on a slow connection, it can delay the rendering process a lot. Because if you're on HTTP1 and if you're on a 3G connection, you have 6 concurrent connections. If you're then downloading large images, you have like the bandwidth exhaustion, and it takes quite a while until a large image is being downloaded. So definitely follow the steps of reducing the quality where possible. If you have an e-commerce shop and say, I really need high quality images because what I'm selling is a high quality product, then there's still the ability to load a lower resolution image first. And once you sort of like structured your site and you show some content, you can swap it out for a high quality image. Always make sure to compress images, because you can save up to 70–80% of the file size by just compressing the image properly. And then it's really important to lazy load content that's below the fold. We keep suggesting that because it makes such a big difference. If you have a lot of images that show below the fold, there's no need to download all of this for your users if some of them might not even scroll all the way down. So it's a really good way to reduce the server requests and free up some bandwidth for more important stuff. And the implementation of lazy loading is pretty straightforward. There are some very tiny JavaScripts that let you basically lazy load by adding a simple class to an image tag. So those are the 4 top speed offenders. Obviously, there's much more. There are like redirects. You could be looking at restructuring your content. So there's a lot more going on where you can improve. But we would say those 4 focus areas, if you have sorted them out, you're probably in a really good shape.
Maybe one point to add to the lazy loading, because I just recently had a question on it. Is there a certain threshold where you would start lazy loading down? Is it like just below the fold, or is it 1.5 above the folds? You know what I mean? And when should I start lazy loading? Because there might be users who actually scroll a little bit right away. So would it make sense to maybe have 1.5 above the fold contents not lazy loaded and then start?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, definitely, because you do sometimes have the sensation that when you scroll down and you're lazy loading, that for a short period of time, you see either a gray background or a spinner because you were pulling in the image at that point. So yeah, definitely, that's a great idea to say, okay, 1.5 from the top. I don't lazy load the images, and everything below that, I actually do lazy load the images. So yeah, thanks, Dennis, for that. And I just look at the chat, and I want to pick up a question because it fits in nicely here. And the question is coming from Muhammad, and he's asking, will AMP resolve this? Well, it's like, how should we answer it? Like, AMP basically follows certain best practices. So if you think about it, that AMP reduces or limits the file size of the CSS resource to 50 kilobytes. AMP requires the CSS to be inline. AMP requires images to always have a height and a width defined, so that the browser can lay out the page without actually having the image ready yet. So if you keep that in mind, then that is one of the reasons AMP is so fast. So if you follow the same best practices, you can also speed up a non-AMP page, probably up to the same standard. But sure, AMP is is great if you want to quickly speed up your site and follow the best practices that AMP requires. And just quickly before I give it back to Dublin, in case you wonder, back in the previous hackathon on airs, we always had a lot of slides, and we decided that this time we want to make it more interactive. So that's why we have less content from our side, and we have some questions prepared, and we're also looking at the chat. So that's why we want to make it interactive now. And give it up to Vincent, who will be able to answer all the great questions that are coming in. So, Vincent, please.
Thank you, Dom, for all these updates. So once again, use the chat to let us know your live questions, and we'll try to answer them. On mobile, at the very bottom of the page, in the YouTube app, you have a little banner that's foldable that says Top Chat, and you can chat in there and ask us your questions. So to come back as well to Mohammed's question about how AMP fits into this this whole speed update story, going away from just the performance aspect, but to the speed update, really the SEO algorithm updates. A question that I've had to answer several times, and that we get often in our support forums and in other communities is, well, does that mean that if I use AMP, my pages will basically not be impacted by the speed update? Does it mean that Google is forcing its technology accelerated mobile pages by using the speed update? So to answer that question, I would say no, because the speed update is technology agnostic, if you will. That means that basically what the speed update focuses on is mostly what happens on the user's device, notwithstanding the technology. So maybe someone is using full HTML, CSS, usual frameworks, and their page is super fast. And then maybe someone is using AMP, but they implemented it in a weird way, and then the page is actually really not loading that fast on users' devices, and then that might be negative for them in terms of the SEO world, right? So this is not as simple as AMP equal I'm safe, everything else I'm not safe.
I think another point here, which is good to mention, I'll just getting this from the blog post now, so you might please keep me honest here, is that like it is a ranking factor, of course, but still we would like rank content and still higher. So there might even be rather slow pages, and I'm not saying just go ahead and have a slow page, but still content is king, I guess, right? So
yeah, that's a very fair point. Between a super fast page that loads in 0.5 seconds on 3G and a page that loads in 10 seconds on 3G as well, then we're not just going to show the first one because it's super fast. If that page has almost no content compared to the other page, which is super relevant, has been existing for a while, is referenced elsewhere on the web, has user interaction, maybe some comments, a forum, whatever it is really adding a lot of value for users, that second page, even if it's quite slow, will probably still continue to be showed. Because ultimately what we want to do is show URLs that have answers to people's questions. So you're very right to call this out.
Still, it might be worth exploring AMP a bit more, because oftentimes it depends a bit on in which vertical you are. It can be the easier option to speed up your site. And Dom, this would also be a question from me to you now. I guess it depends on the vertical, but what is your experience with implementing AMP pages on like development effort and the time it might take?
Yeah, I mean, it varies greatly. So we've seen companies that implemented a AMP page within a day. There are others that obviously need a bit more time because the infrastructure is a bit more complex. But typically, AMP is quite quick. In a couple of weeks, you can implement AMP. So yeah, I wouldn't want to give like a definite answer to that. But considering AMP is standalone, you can definitely play around with it and get some results very quickly, and then you can see if that's a technology that works for you. Yeah, I think important to re-emphasize, we're not trying to push that technology on you. So like if you say, well, I can actually live without AMP, that's completely fine. We're trying to kind of like set a framework of best practices that will speed up your site. And if you follow that on your own page, then you will also see the positive speed impact. So, but definitely I recommend to play around with it, because there are a lot of cool features and we're developing more and we're listening to the community. So yeah, again, like, have a look at it, check it out. And if you think it's right for you, then it shouldn't take too much of your time to get the first release up there.
Thank you, Dom. Switching gears a bit, we have a second question from Mohammed that was asking, why does the speed scorecard, does not support CC-TLDs, so country code TLDs? I'm not sure exactly what that question entails. If there's an example that you could share with us, Mohammed. I don't know if you, either of you has heard about what this could be related to.
I mean, we already said that we're taking the data from the Chrome User Experience Report, and it basically means that the data set is currently not large enough to include all the TLDs. I think in January, we just added 3 million, and we're obviously aiming to add much more domains. But again, right now, it's quite a large data set. If you use a Speed Scorecard and you cannot find your domain, unfortunately, it's probably not included in the Chrome User Experience Report yet. We're working hard on it, and definitely let us know. And we want to try and look into adding as much content as we can.
All right, thank you. Another question we can look at is Jeremiah's question, which says, what W3C timing data points does PageSpeed look at specifically? Is it page interactive? Is it first byte? Is it DOM loaded?
So PageSpeed, obviously, it's complex, and we're looking at multiple factors. The best answer we can give you here is if you use the speed scorecard to rank domains, it uses a combination of onload, of DOM content loaded, and on first contentful paint. There's not one single metric that you should focus on, because each metric has sort of like its own importance. So definitely keep an eye on as many metrics as you can.
I think it's also worth pointing out at this point, all of the tools will not tell you how you will rank in SEO in the end. They all there for typically different audiences, or depending on if you want to have real user metrics or more of a laboratory experience for debugging. They all have like their cost, definitely, but none of them will really tell you if I'm good in, let's say, web page test, I'll be good in SEO, right?
Yeah, pretty much. The SEO side of things, if there's one general thing that we can say, it's that it focuses on user experience. So it's a little bit vague, but some of the metrics that we've been talking about are doing just that, right? So how fast does it load for the user? What is really happening on the device as opposed to on the developer's computer on a 24-inch screen with a really good landline connection, etc. So be sure to look into these when you think about performance.
I think another point worth pointing out is in our last, or the one before that, Hackathon on Air, we pointed out how can I actually check what is my user experience. So we're tying web analytics data to potential stuff you can do with your mobile site. So let's say, well, if you see your bounce rate is very high for your landing pages, it's an easy one. That is probably very closely tied to speed. Whereas, let's say, people exit at weird points, and this might be more of a PWA thing. So maybe check that out as well. See what you can check on Google Analytics, and then just in general, as Vincent just said, try to improve user experience. This should definitely improve your SEO ranking at some point as well, because I think that's what it basically comes up to. If I have a nice user experience and provide the right answers to the questions people ask, this should be rewarded by Google.
Yeah. It's never one-to-one causality, but there's certainly a logic there. You mentioned PWA's, progressive web apps. There's a question there that sort of segues into it, and that I can cover, which is why would you use AMP right now when modern AMP is slower than an optimized responsive website? And that comes from Antonio. So why use AMP? Well, you tell me. AMP is a framework. There are many frameworks you can use, and it's not a one-size-fits-all, and it's not a magical solution that will solve all of your problems. So basically, you might have a reason to use AMP on only a certain part of your website, right? You might want to be very specific. You might think it's really not useful, so you don't use it. It's really up to you. You have to do that analysis and choose which technology fits best your needs. One use case that we're starting to see more of, and that is getting people talking these days, is the whole AMP to PWA sort of experience, which is that you can find some articles about this. We'll try to link to it as well in the description, maybe after or in the comments after this hangout. Basically, this is a way of providing some AMP pages that would load pretty fast. Maybe, I don't know, maybe not as fast as a super fast responsive for simple content, etc. But that technology is very well designed to fit very nicely into progressive web apps, which is another framework which enables offline content, which enables notifications, so re-engagement with users, many different things of the modern web. And AMP is a very nice segue into this. So you might think this is a good use case, even though it might be a little bit slower than your responsive pages, for example.
I think it's also worth pointing out that you can hand tune your sites and they might be almost as fast, but it might be tricky to get the same instant loading experience, since AMP is not just, it is a bunch of web best practices, but it also uses the Google cache. So if you're fine with that and you pre-render stuff and get it out of the Google cache, it's very likely that the loading will be faster than even the very best hand-tuned HTML, vanilla HTML, CSS site. Maybe that's Dom. Do you have an opinion on that? That's usually the answer I give to my customers as well, because the Google cache is actually the second thing that makes it as lightning fast as it is.
No, I mean that's right. But I think Vincent put it nicely. If you feel that AMP is not right for you, just don't use it. We're not forcing anyone to use it, but it is a good framework. But yeah, definitely you need to make the call whether it's right for you or not. I just read a question from Igoshi asking, does changing hosting affect rankings? And then in parentheses, shifting from one dedicated hosting to another. Well, it depends. So when we're talking about speed and you change from a really slow hosting to a really fast hosting, it might change your rankings. If it's vice versa, it might also change your rankings. The question is at that point too broad to answer. So if everything stays the same, the rankings will probably stay the same too. So yeah, that's the best answer I can give to that.
To expand a little bit of that and to talk more generally about SEO very quickly as a parenthesis. So that's in terms of speed, right? And the sort of speed that the hosting provider is able to provide to the visitors to your website. What you would have as an SEO manager or website owner to pay attention to when you switch hosting providers is everything related to the crawling of your website. So your website, your URLs needs to be crawled properly by the Googlebot, which is the automated spider software that basically crawls all the web and tries to find all of the pages that exist online. So when you change hosting providers, you need to make sure that you have sufficient bandwidth for the crawling. You need to make sure that you're not blocking specific IP addresses that are used by the Googlebot crawler. You need to make sure that in terms of configuration and accessibility of your pages, nothing changes there. So that's in addition to the speed update, but keep that in mind. All right, do we have another question here? Did you find one, Dom?
I think I just want to answer to one of the questions that Heather submitted. Basically, Heather is asking if we have any examples of sites that implemented our recommendations. So I think what I would do in your case is, why don't you check out the speed scorecard and just find some domains that are ranking well as in terms of speed, that get a really good speed score. And then you go to this page and then you have a look at what have they done to achieve this very quick speed score. Because if a site gets a really good result, they definitely followed certain best practices. And I think that's where you can extract a lot of valuable information. You will see that some of them might have asynced all their JavaScript. Others will have split up their CSS files, prioritize the content, improve their images. So that would probably be the first step I would take, to just find the quickest sites and just have a look at what are they doing, and maybe certain parts you can then sort of copy and do on your own side as well.
To add to this, maybe, if I'm not mistaken, we also, for most countries, we released a benchmark study now as well, out on the Winning on Mobile Hub, as well on Think with Google, just as the speed scorecard, where you actually can see domains that did really well in terms of speed and user experience. There's also a ranking and a little bit more of an explanation what went into that rankings. It's not just speed, it's also a lot of user experience, but this might be worth checking it out. I think the easiest way is we can either link it in the comments or just Google Winning on Mobile, and it should end up on the Think with Google side. So this might be worth having a look as well.
And my personal advice as well is it's kind of a generic advice, but just talk to people, talk to other developers, ask them what they've tried, go to conferences, listen to what they say. There's meetups everywhere. There's JavaScript meetups, there's web development, front-end, mobile development meetups everywhere. So just try to go to these and talk to people and listen what they have to say. Heather is following up with, did you say benchmark study?
Yeah, that's, I hope that's the official name. It is a benchmark study. Again, Winning on Mobile on Think with Google should lead you to the right example. Yeah. It depends a bit which country you're in. So I think we haven't released all of them, if I'm correct. But yeah, you should find at least, worst case, just studies from other markets. But still, if you're looking for URL examples and from a technical side of view, this will help you anyway.
Yeah. We have another question by Heather says, thank you.
You're very welcome.
You're welcome. Christian asks us, how will Google deal in terms of SEO with non-server side render pages, basically full browser side rendering? So for this, I will answer with one generic answer again. This depends on how the Google bot can actually render the page. When the Google bot visits your page, it accesses it, it loads it, and it renders the code, right? So it tries to interpret exactly how the page will look like for the user. It does this to try to understand your CSS, your JavaScript, all of these resources, and it will actually, in some tools, tell you if there are resources that are blocking this, if there are problems with the rendering of exploring, of crawling a URL. The nifty thing is that Google makes available a tool for you to check that. So it's within the Google Search Console, which is the general set of tools used by SEOs to look at their websites in terms of SEO. And within that suite of tools, the specific report is called Fetch as Google. So you can go in there, Fetch as Google in the Search Console, indicate a URL, and then ask for fetch and render. And when you ask for fetch and render, it will do exactly this automatically at this moment. So it will crawl the page instantly and go see what it looks like. And it will show you how the page has been rendered. And then you will be able to see if there are rendering problems or not. That being said, it doesn't see, the Googlebot does not see everything. It is running off a certain version of Chrome, which is now starting to be a little bit older, let's say. So some of the very newer frameworks and technologies might still be tough to interpret and to render fully by the Googlebot. There is a discussion group that is out there where some Googlers from the rendering side of things within our engineering teams survey the discussion and answer when people have questions about a certain specific new framework, etc. So again, we will share this in the documents or in the description later on after this hangout on it.
Cool. Any more questions?
We have a follow-up from Christian, which is, how about Google Ads bots and others? Are they able to understand the content? I'm not sure, to be honest. I don't work with the ads side of things. I don't know if you would have an idea about this, either of you.
Not me, unfortunately.
No, we all don't work with the ads team. More than happy to read up on it and share it in one of the future Hackathon on Air if we have anything good to say here. But yeah, we don't want to give away information that might not be accurate. Sandeep asks how to add a site into Google News. That's a bit unrelated to the speed update. Write good content and build a strong website, and then you might be picked up. I also think there is actually a way to apply to be included, but yeah, there's no magic trick on how to get your articles into Google News. Cool. Let's yeah, back to you, Vincent. I think you have a couple more questions.
I think we covered most of the questions and the points that we had prepared in case we didn't have questions. So that's really good. The questions were actually quite on point. There's one thing that wasn't addressed, which is something that I hear actually quite often, which is this doesn't really affect me, right? Because my users are not on smartphones at all. I don't see visits coming from smartphones on my website. So I shouldn't really care about the speed update, right? To which my answer is usually to say, well, why are they not coming to your website for mobile? Is it because they're not searching at all on mobile? Or is it because your website is not ready at all for mobile and basically is not catering to them at all? They try to load it, it doesn't work, they just bounce away because they don't want to wait 20 seconds for the page to load, etc. So I would say don't dismiss straight away working on your mobile website and on the speed of your mobile website just because currently you're not seeing any traffic. It might be that there is no traffic because you're not focusing on it at all.
Good point. Although I have to say, like, it's hard to find. Like, for me, it must be hard to find actually sites with no mobile traffic. Maybe I'm a bit biased here because I'm usually just consulting on mobile user experience. But yeah,
You have a certain set of websites.
There's probably a professional bias in there as well, but still, my feeling would be that most sites will have mobile traffic at some point.
Yeah,
just generally what we're seeing of our queries and what most of my customers tell me. In terms of their traffic, for a lot of them, actually, mobile traffic now is overtaken traffic coming from desktop, especially if you also count tablet traffic into mobile traffic. Then usually it's the case it's over 50% of overall traffic. Okay.
We have one last question from Jeremiah, who is apologizing about the fact that it's the last question, or about the fact that he's asking too many questions. I'm not sure. He's asking, any good libraries or strategies for detecting content that is below the fold, or is it just pick a pixel height and run with it?
I'll take that. I think the best answer here is just do a quick Google search. We try to avoid recommending one library over the other. There is a lot of stuff out there, especially on GitHub. So just have a browse, and you will find tons of scripts and libraries that will do exactly what you need. And a lot of them work quite well. We tested a few of them. So yeah, I think just Google search will do the job here.
All right, thank you. The questions, they keep coming. That's great. So hi, from Nico. I'd like to know if you have any advice for the running for sites running on new JavaScript frameworks like React.js or Angular.js, right? So this would be covered in this sort of discussion would be covered in the discussion group that I mentioned a few minutes ago. That we will share a description of this video. So come back to it in an hour or so, and you will have a link where this sort of discussion is happening. How do very modern frameworks actually work with rendering from the Googlebot side?
Yeah, and just to jump in there, because there's a lot you can do when you're running a site on React or Angular. There are a lot of ways you can optimize it. And just recently, one of our fellow Googlers, Adi Osmani, posted a really cool post on Tinder and how they optimized their PWA that was built with React. And there are tons of tips in there of how you can use code splitting and optimize React for speed. So I highly recommend this. So if you just do a quick Google search for that post, I can just, yeah, again, highly recommend it. It's full of great content.
I think we're nearing probably the end, right? It's been almost an hour, but there's one question that is actually pretty good for this, which is from Ravi. So greetings, I joined this session, but I'm not able to understand the topic fully. Is there any update coming from Google for SEOs or for websites? Or so my answer would be this video is going to be available a couple minutes after we finish the live version of it on YouTube at the same address. So just make sure to start watching from the beginning. Short answer is yes, there is an update coming in July.
We won't spoil it now. Cool. Yeah, I think with that, it's time to wrap up. Maybe one more comment. Also in the comments, again, you will find our event page. So if you find that helpful, please go to our event page, consider signing up there. If you sign up, you will just receive 2 emails a month where we just remind you that we will stream again. Usually it's the 3rd week of every month. And if you're new to that, usually we mostly cover mobile topics ranging from technical topics to UX topics to now SEO topics. Usually if we're not specialists in this, we're trying to get other Googlers who are specialists to get on the show. That worked quite well so far. So yeah, please go there, check the content out. There's also a repository of other videos, see if there's something helpful for you. And sign up if you feel like it, and join us for our future streams. Cool.
Yeah, thank you again for inviting me. That was
very welcome.
Really, really great experience.
Thank you for joining in. Dom, thanks again. I hope you're still good in London and not like covered in snow already.
I'm sitting in a room with no windows. I might be covered in snow, but yeah, it was, as always, a pleasure. It was great to have you guys all watching, and definitely check back. And most importantly, follow us on Twitter, because we're quite active there. And if you have any questions, send us a tweet, and we give our best to answer your questions in the future. So definitely try and stay connected to us. And yeah, just, follow us and have a good rest of the day, I would say.
Cool. With that,
thank you.
bye-bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in.
Bye, guys.